everybody. Before we come up with our speaker tonight, I'd like to talk for a few minutes about Minnesota Guild of Woodworkers. My name is Paul Ehrlich. I've been on the board of the Guild for about almost 3 years now. And recently our president stepped down and we were looking for volunteers and I offered to take over for him. So I am the new president. And those of you who don't know the Guild, we've got about 850 members. We do these monthly programs every month. We also do several big events a year. So in April, we held a show called Northern Woods at Eden Prairie Center. We had some great folks that came and did the show at the end of April. Fantastic event. Last month's meeting was some of the winners that came and showed some of their pieces and how they did some of those. Our other big event is every fall. We do something called the Woodworkers Expo, which is for the second year in a row will be at the Minnesota State Fairgrounds in the Eco Building. And that's a great event. Last year we had about 2,000 people that came and visited, had a whole bunch of participants, vendors, demonstrations, there was kids programs, just a ton of stuff. It's a day-long program on a Saturday. Hopefully this year we'll get another perfect Saturday day. Our third big event traditionally is the fall seminar, and I've actually run the fall seminar for the last couple of years. And good news, bad news stories, this year we're not going to do a fall seminar. And instead, we're focusing on building out an all-new education program. So we did a survey earlier this year to our members. One of the questions in the survey was, why did you join the Guild? And you could select more than one thing. And I thought, well, this is kind of a gimme question because 90% of the people are going to say, I joined the Guild to get discounts on tools and stuff, and that's why I joined. Interestingly, that was like the number 6 item that people chose. About half the people selected that. Number 1 thing people chose was education. And we said, well, are we satisfying what you're doing with education with the fall seminar? And they're like, it's not quite what we want. We'd like to see more hands-on classes. We'd like to see more things in a variety. We'd like to keep seeing national woodworkers. So we're actually working on building out a new education program. And in order to do that, we're going to hold off on doing a fall seminar this year to get it right. So anybody who's interested in education, see me, and we've got a committee that's really active in this. We always go through and ask anybody if this is your first meeting or if you're a new member of the Guild, and just to kind of stand up and introduce yourself. And I know you are, if you want to go first. Yep. You don't have to stand up. You can just talk. That's great.
Once I get to this, I'm okay. My name's Dave Winkler. I retired 8 years ago. 2 years ago, I was asked by one of my kids to make a box. Now I've got a wood shop. I can just box. So here we are 2 years later, and I've made 62 boxes. I just fell in love with doing it. So that's my story.
Great. We need to get you involved with the box making SIG. Yeah. Other folks? Yeah, go ahead, sir.
First year, I started working on the farm. So that was a long time ago. I like to design and make furniture. Right now I'm working on a Chinese piece before price. And I have great expectations, but in reality, it's not turning out.
Well, good luck. I like to design and make it, although my wife says if you're going to make 2 pieces, you got to do both of them, because I know you like the design part a lot more than the making part.
My name is Steve Taylor, and I live at the Kensington in St. Anthony. And Richard drove me here tonight, so that's my first time.
Good, great.
And the piece that Richard is making, he's pretty amazing, actually. He had like 3 angles stuck together like the chair.
Oh, cool.
And they all fit, go different directions.
Cool.
Pretty nice. So he's
very cool.
He's a good worker.
Great, great. We're glad to have you here.
I sort of deal with cribbage boards more.
Oh, great. Yes, sir.
My name is Chris Schmidt. I've been woodworking for about 5 years. I've
moved up to the Menominee area, Wisconsin.
Okay.
Built a house and a shop, and I'm currently setting it up. So I like to build furniture of various sizes. So
Great. Welcome, Chris. Anybody else? Oh, yes, sir.
I'm Michael Schaefer. I've been in the guild for 3 years. First time I've been to a meeting.
Good.
I started milling wood off of property that I owned back in '91, and it's been drying for a long time. Since then, I've added to it, and I have lots of wood. My wife hopes I have an equal number of projects to go
Excellent.
with all the wood I have.
Excellent. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
I'm Silver Blake's my first time coming.
Great.
I've been kind of started doing house projects that turned into woodwork.
Excellent. And I see somebody in the back row.
Aaron Olson, I joined the guild and I haven't been able to make it to a couple of meetings now, but hoping I can come more often. And we moved into our house about 12 years ago. There's a little spot in the basement that we couldn't actually store anything because it just got too musty and dirty. So I'm like, well, that'd make a really good wine cellar.
Oh,
Didn't have any woodworking tools, but YouTube was available. So I learned how to do that, Craigslist for 2 tools. And then I'm like, what am I gonna do with all these tools? I learned how to do a few things, move up a few things, started making cutting boards. Cutting boards
Good.
led to more tools, more expensive stuff. And the garage was filled with tools, filled with wood, and I no longer sell them anymore because about as fast as I can make them, they end up becoming either gifts for people
Good.
or for fundraisers and things like that. So well, entirely too many fundraising things, but yeah. I enjoy doing that. And just wanted to connect with more people.
so did you finish the wine cellar, or is that still an ongoing
Oh, the
project?
wine cellar's done.
Oh, it is. That's excellent.
It's absolutely beautiful.
I thought that was the end of the story. Was it still coming up? Excellent. Yes, sir.
Chris Sharma, I just learned about the guild at.
Excellent.
Yeah, I'm still learning, made a couple things, but got a lot going.
Great. Anybody else? Got one more here. Yeah.
I'm Jackie Feely and I turned 10, which started last fall, and I'm doing my first craft show this fall.
That's excellent. Welcome, Jack. All right. Anybody else? Well, welcome, everybody. So we are an all-volunteer organization. And one of the things that we have a lot of really dedicated volunteers that really make things happen, including our board members. We have 2 of our board members here tonight. And if I could just ask you to at least raise your hand. Matt is in charge of our program committee, and Angela's in charge of membership. So if you're interested in joining, Angela's the person for you to talk to. We are very fortunate. We have a lot of very, very dedicated, very, very long-term volunteers. We just had 4 board members who rolled off the board. Normally, when you roll off the board, that's something you do after 2 or 3 years or a year or 2, you know. One of our board members, Richard Tendick, who was involved in everything that goes on in the guild, rolled off after 25 years, Matt? 23, something like that, 20 plus years this fall. Bob Krabby, who just many of you may know Bob. Bob had worked at Forest Products and has been really involved with the guild. Has been on the board for 15 years, just retired and built a cabin in Wisconsin and moved out. Ed New, who'd been president for 8 years and treasurer for several years before that, is stepping out. And then Mike Johnson, who had helped to run our program committee and then ran Northern Woods, is also stepped down. But I am proud to announce that we have 4 brand new board members. And I'm going to send an email out this week announcing these. Jake Brown, who's a really accomplished professional woodworker, fantastic guy. Jake is taking over Northern Woods and is active on our board. Norbert Dielabowski. Norbert is going to be one of our board members at large. He's going to be involved in our education effort, and he's also going to become the vice chair for our expo, our Woodworkers Expo in the fall. Chrislyn Goodman, who is an education professional, is going to be involved in a bunch of things with the guild, including helping to give us some direction on our education side. And then Michael Getz is going to be our new communications chair. And communications is a new focus we have in the guild, kind of trying to get more word out inside the organization and outside. So I am delighted to have, as of last night, 4 new board members. And I'm still looking for one more who's in the room today who may join us next month. So Carl will keep you on tap. To a couple of other housekeeping things, our next meeting is our annual picnic. It's at Central Park in Roseville on Tuesday, July 8th. Is that right, Matt? Not on Wednesday, July 9th, as it says in some of the emails, but it's our regular Tuesday night. We do ask for that meeting that you RSVP in advance because Matt picks up beer and sandwiches and other stuff, and we just want to get a count so we got enough food and drink for everybody. Two other little things. Every year we award 2 scholarships for people that want to attend woodworking training. They're for up to $1,000. We awarded those scholarships in April, I think in April. In May, one of our long-term members, Mark Laub and Mark Laub Studios, stepped forward and said, you know, I'd like to do a 3rd scholarship and I'd like to fund it. So the Mark Laub scholarship is available. Applications are open right now and the deadline is Friday. So if you're interested, fill out the application. It's on the website. And then the last thing is, I mentioned our focus on education. If you have interest in education, in helping us figure out things like what classes to offer, what we need to focus on, where we want to be doing classes, if you might be interested in teaching, if you might be interested in volunteering, if you have any suggestions for what we should or shouldn't do, we're looking for a lot of input. And we did, as I said, send a survey out in January. We had about 20% of our members respond, which is about 180 responses. Half of those folks said, I'd like to be involved in more discussion. So if you did respond and said, I told you already, yeah, we've got your names, we'll work on that. But that is a focus we have. Matt, do you want to do drawings?
Everybody get a ticket?
Does everybody have a red ticket? So the first winner of what?
Let's see, that will be.
A gift certificate?
Lee Valley.
So this is a Lee Valley, I think this is a $50, I can see from here, it's a $50 Lee Valley gift certificate. And the winner, the last 3 digits are 749. All right. $50 at Lee Valley should get you really far. On really great stuff, though. I mean, they're great companies. All good stuff. And the next a Craig, looks like a hole jig and some screws, maybe fastener starter kit. 731. All right. Hey. I think you could make some boxes with this. You gonna take it? Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. I tell you, you were 1 away from my ticket, so you know. Tim's?
50, I think you have to look at it. I think it's 50.
Okay, so this is a gift certificate from Tim's Lumber and Sawing. I believe it's for $50. I'm sorry, for $150. Wow, that's pretty good. 747. All right, congratulations. Ah, the saw blades.
We're almost done.
We're almost done. We've given away a lot of saw blades. So these are our saw blades from Crescent in 3 or 4 different sizes. 748. All right. Is that it?
That's it. Yes.
Okay. So Matt, I'm going to turn this over to you and let you introduce our speaker for tonight. And once again, thanks everybody for coming. Really appreciate your being members of the Guild and being involved. And let me know what I can do to help.
All right, so we have Bob Behnke. Let's put the camera over there. From Franklin International,
Franklin
right?
International.
Did I say your last name right, Bob?
Behnke, yeah, it's
Behnke.
in key to the bank, right?
So he's the International Technical Service Manager for the Construction Division. I got this wrote down, so I could never memorize all.
I'll finish for you. So what I do for Franklin International is kind of, that's all
Good.
gurgly
Thank you.
burgly stuff. So So I'm the technical service manager. What does that mean? So on every bottle, everything that we sell, there is an 800 number on the bottle. On this one, it's towards the bottom. It can be a little bit of an eye thing, but that rings to my group. So if you want me, just ask for Bob. I'm the only Bob in the group. And so this is my business card, and I give out my business cards all over the world. So, so you have that. The other thing that we do in our group, not only with the 800 number, but then we also do some research and development. Basically, if a competitive product comes out on the marketplace or somebody comes up with a question I can't answer tonight, we'll go to the lab and we'll test it. And we have some new information available on a couple of things that we have tested from questions that I've gotten doing these presentations. So these presentations are, how would you say, this is more of a question and answer session, right? So what I want this to be is kind of personal to this group, right? Because if I just stand up here and tell you all of the stuff about glue, these guys will be asleep, these guys will be on their phone and all of that. So we're going to kind of make this a discussion. Now, if I have a slide for it later on, I'll just say, hey, can we hold off on that question for a little bit? I'll have a slide and then we can go through that. But yeah, please raise your hand. Let's get the questions going when the stuff comes up, right?
And then Bob, could I ask that you repeat the question so people on Zoom can hear it through the mic?
Okay. All right. All right. So we're going to get kind of started here with the presentation. So we make a lot of different types of adhesives, right? So we do construction adhesives, we do flooring adhesives, we do sealants, we do all different types of adhesives. So tonight, though, we're going to focus on wood gluing, and wood gluing specifically for fine woodworking, right? So, I mean, you can do, put together a deck or a fence. Usually you're not using the fine wood glues, usually maybe a construction adhesive or something like that, right? So we're going to focus on wood. Wood, the original composite, and the reason we love it, it's easy to work with, tool, shape, and it's lovely, right? I mean, the different types of woods that are out there, the different figurations, the grains, the patterns, and putting a finish on and making it the color that you want. I mean, this is the reason why we really have a passion for woodworking. But because it's wood, wood is a natural product, right? So it is not manufactured in a factory somewhere like a piece of plastic is, right? And so wood has different characteristics that will affect how you can glue it together. We're going to kind of go through those. One of the easier ones is wood density, right? So, and I had a call, this had to be a good 10 years ago, and the guy calls me up, he says, I need your strongest wood glue. And because I'm curious about what people are doing, and it always is easier for me to give good advice if I know what you're doing, I said, well, what are you doing? And he said, well, I'm making airplanes. I said, so model airplanes, right? He says, yeah. So I said, well, balsa wood, right? He goes, yes. Well, balsa wood is going to break somewhere around 40 to 80 PSI. And when I say PSI, we're talking pounds per square inch, and we test it in shear, right? So we take two blocks, glue them together, and then shear them apart. We don't pull them apart that way, typically shear. And the reason we do shear is that's typically the failure mode for a lot of the woodworking projects, right? Now, some of it's cleavage and things like that, but they're all, when we do a test on tensile test, which is pulling it apart, we usually see the same strength, right? So usually it's what I'm going to tell you tonight, most of it is in shear. Now, what I always try and tell people is, let's keep that in perspective, right? So even with 40 to 60 pounds per square inch, I have a section that's this high. I can glue a hook to the wall and then hang 60 or 80 pounds to that, right? So we want to keep things in perspective when we talk about strength. Now, most of your domestics are going to be between poplar being around 800 to 1200, and then maple usually around 25 to 35, depending on the hardness of the maple. When we test our wood glues, we have to find the really, really hard maples, right? Because if I get wood failure, right, when I test and I get wood failure, I'm really not testing the glue. I really end up testing the strength of the wood, And so right now we're actually having a hard time finding wood good enough or strong enough where I can actually test the glue itself, right? So, so typically the density of the wood is going to kind of be relative strength of the wood too. Okay, so keep that in perspective when you're putting glue together. The other thing we want to talk about is moisture content. If you're gluing with a water-based adhesive, at some point in time, if the wood has enough moisture, it isn't going to want to soak it out of your glue, and so it will not dry. So moisture content tends to be important in terms of, well, I usually get the question, how long do I need to clamp it? And my statement back to you is going to be, I don't know. And the reason I don't know is I don't know what the moisture content is. I don't know what your humidity in your shop is, right? And so these things are going to play a part in how fast the glue is going to dry and set. Now, when we do testing in our lab, we use 8% moisture content. So anything that I'm going to tell you in terms of set time and all that is going to be for 8% moisture content of the wood, 70 degrees Fahrenheit. Moisture content, and 50% relative humidity. Sorry, I knew there was another one in there somewhere. All right, so if you're at 8%, and let me kind of give you kind of a rule of thumb. If I glue something up with, say, Type Bond Original or Type Bond 2, both having 5 minutes of open time, and we'll discuss what that means, and 10 to 15 minutes to clamp it up before the glue starts to set, and again, we'll talk about that. If that's at 8%, if now my moisture is up to 10%, I can double that. If my moisture now is at 12%, I can triple or quadruple that. If I get above 17%, it will not dry at all. And so you will wait until the wood dries itself before the glue tends to dry. Now, if in the winter, right, this is Minnesota, it's minus 40 degrees outside on one day or two, right? I used to live here, so I know. And you're heating the air from the outside, it comes in your house. Now the relative humidity gets down to 10% in some cases. We have measured wood in this area at about 2% moisture content. So if you're at 2% moisture content, that 5 to 10 minutes may now be half of 30 seconds. Okay, so again, we want to be cognizant of what that is. Now, it's very rare that you get down to those types unless it's sitting in full sun or in a very, very, very dry air for long periods of time. Usually you're going to see, and I think I have a slide here somewhere, usually between 6 to, I mean, if you're near one of the lakes, you could be up around 10% moisture content. Again, that's going to change in the winter. So who here has a moisture meter? Raise your hand. Yeah, so I mean, if you guys kind of note that, right? The next thing we want to talk about is changes in dimension. So as the wood dries from, and it starts at 30% moisture content, that's when wood starts to shrink. So if your wood has more than 30% moisture content, it's going to stay the same size. You get it fully wet, 30% is where it starts to change. And that has to do with how much water the cellulose has. And we'll talk a little bit why cellulose is important. But wood will tend to shrink differently depending on the grain structure, right? So when we look at the root of the tree, going all the way up to the top, very little change in dimension with moisture content. And as a matter of fact, so little that you can almost forget about it, right? Now, when we talk about radial dimension is from the middle of the tree to the outside of the tree, where that will shrink by X. Now, when I say X, X is a figure that is based upon each of the different species of trees, right? And as a matter of fact, if you have poplar that was grown down south versus poplar that was grown up north, you're going to have a different X, and X being the factor of how much it's going to shrink and swell with the changes in moisture. Now, the other one is going to be the tangential direction, which is going to be around this way, right? So that's going to typically be 2x. So it will shrink twice as much in this direction. And that's why when you see a log drying out in the sun, it's going to do what? Crack like this, because it's shrinking less in this direction than it is in this direction, right? So it's going to want to open up. And that's a big issue in some cases. And we'll kind of go through why in some of this. Now, one of the things that we get a lot of calls about. So let's say that you start with I've got 3 pieces of wood, right? So one of the wood pieces is at 10% moisture content. The outside 2 are 6% moisture content. Eventually, that wood will, what we call, equilibrate. Grab you a couple samples there, one of each. Just come in. So the wood's going to equilibrate. So what's going to happen in this particular case is the one with the higher moisture content is going to shrink. We see this mostly a lot with tabletops, when you're making tabletops, right? When you just put it together, you sand it flat, you put that finish on, and it looks like a mirror, right? I mean, it's perfect. But 5 days later or 5 weeks later, depending on the humidity temperature, now I've got a little dip in my table. It has to do with differences. Now, this can also occur, let's say if I've got walnut here and maple here, right? They're going to shrink differentially, right? So we must be cognizant of that to make sure that we understand what's going to go on. The next thing that we want to talk about, and we get tons of calls about this, is what we call sunken glue joints. These are water-based adhesives. What happens when you add water-based wood glue to wood? Moisture and will tend to swell. Typically, it will swell around the glue lines. These calls usually start with, listen, I used your glue and it's extruding from the glue line, because they can feel a ridge, right? Where the glue line is, they can feel a ridge. Well, the issue is that my glue, everybody's scraped wood glue when it's dried, hard plastic, right? So usually I start, my questioning is, well, how much clamping pressure do you have on that? He said, well, I don't have clamping pressure on it. I took it out of the clamps a long time ago. I said, well, okay, so let me get this straight. The glue is a hard plastic and it's extruding from the joint with no pressure on it. You've just violated the laws of physics and we're going to be filthy rich, right? But really that doesn't occur. The problem comes in is that the wood will shrink and swell with moisture, but the glue does not. Unless you're using hide glue. Hide glue will tend to shrink and swell with moisture also, very similar to wood. And so in those cases, that didn't usually show up a lot in those cases when hide glue was the glue of choice back in the, before World War II, right? And so this becomes an issue. Now, again, when we look at, how'd you say, in this particular case, changes in moisture on here, you're going to get a lot of change, 2x in this direction, 1x in this direction. And so what usually happens on a plain sawn board is you're going to get them to warp a little bit, right? Quarter sawn, where they're up and down, then you'll get changes in thickness. Now that will exacerbate this a little more, and I've got another slide on there. So what happens is if you sand it too early, right? If you sand it too early, you're sanding away swollen wood, and then the wood will eventually equilibrate back to what the boards are. And so those areas will dip around there. One way to test is to put a straight edge over there, shine a flashlight behind, and you'll actually see a little bit of a dip of light in there. That's how you can tell that this is the problem. But you're going to feel a ridge. In a lot of cases, anybody here segmented wood turners? So, I mean, you're probably very familiar with feeling the glue lines on a segmented thing right after, because you sand it, right? I mean, and you sand a turn piece and it's like, that baby smoothness. mean, there's nothing like feeling that last sand. It's so smooth that you just feel it in your hand. It feels good. But after a couple days, you go, because you want to brag to your, I feel this is really great. And now you got spider webs all over it from the glue lines. Yeah. But that's what's occurring on here. The other thing, sorry, let me go back to that. So this was the sunken glue joint where you, sorry, you swell, you sand, it shrinks, okay? Sorry, I had the wrong slide up. This one happens normally and naturally. So it seems that tabletop, the tables that are sold into Arizona were made on the coast in California. And we'll get calls, and usually it's, your glue sucks. But what'll happen, so let's say I make a table here in summer, and it's relatively humid. And then I put that table in there. It looks great. I waited so usually the question I get is, well, how long do I have to wait before I sand it? And my statement is, if you want a guarantee, if you're calling me on the phone, it's because you want a guarantee, and you probably have your lawyer sitting next to you at the time of the call. I'm going to tell you, wait 3 weeks. And everybody here is like, I can't wait. So what I will tell you is if you wait 24 hours before sanding, usually you're going to be 50-50. If you wait 3 days, usually that takes care of about 90% of everything. If you wait 3 weeks, I've never seen a problem of waiting after 3 weeks. So again, it just depends. If you're making a $15,000 table for somebody, it may be worth waiting before sanding. Okay. Now I have seen this where it has gotten so bad, that shrinkage, that it's actually pulled the finish up, and you get white lines all the way down. And again, it's on the glue line. So the call usually starts with my glue sucks because it's pulling the finish up. Okay. The other thing we want to talk about is the stuff that's in trees, right? Oils, tannic acids, the other thing that's a tree produce. And now the trees produce those because that's actually their immune system, right? So a tree growing in the forest, really happy, the sun's great, it's wonderful. And all of a sudden a colony of termites moves into the neighborhood, right? Well, that tree can't pick up and move to a new neighborhood, right? So trees have evolved the ability to produce chemicals, oils in this particular case for termites, that will keep it from digesting the cellulose, okay? Other things, the tannic acids are for, sometimes getting rid of the viruses and the funguses and all of that will invade trees. So the question is why does that matter? Well, let's talk a little bit about cellulose. So who here believes that wood glues bond through the pores of the wood? Okay, normally I get hands that go up. And I know you've maybe heard this before. So you're not going for the bait. So that's not true. And the reason that it's not true, and I can tell you that, is what would be the strongest bond if pores, gluing through the pores of the wood is important? End grain would be your strongest bond, would it not? But it's not. It tends to be the weakest. And the reason it's the weakest is because wood glues bond to the cellulose in the wood. And there's very little cellulose in the end grain. I mean, you're bonding to basically the ends of straws. So there's very little to bond to. How the glues work is this oxygen and hydrogen. I'm a chemist, so I'm going to give you some stuff. Don't fall asleep in the back. I'll try to make it interesting or fast. But anyway, so oxygen and hydrogens, hydroxyl groups is what they're called. And so the oxygens love electrons, right? So they're going to pull electrons, want to pull electrons towards it. Hydrogens are like, you can have them. And so what happens is you get a net negative charge on the oxygen and net positive charge on there. So basically you have what I would call an atomic neodymium magnet. Okay? So let's take that. I mean, everybody's put a neodymium magnet on their fridge and tried to pull it off, right? Pretty hard to, but you can get it off. Note that this is just two of the glucose molecules that make polyglucose or cellulose in this particular instance. There are thousands, millions, billions of these. So let's just take your refrigerator and let's put 1,000 of those magnets on your refrigerator and try to pull them off all at the same time. What happens? You pull the door right off, right? So this is really what happens with wood. So what's called the hydrogen bonding occurs, right? You have this positive hooking to that negative, and there's just tons of them all over the place. This is what wood glues work. Now, somebody asked me, they said, well, the pores have to give you some percentage of bonding. And I was like, I did. So we were like, I don't know how you would test it. So I was thinking one day, and the chemist who actually developed Type Bond 2 was walking past my office. I said, Chuck, come here once. I said, Chuck, can you do one thing for me? So how the wood glues work is the polyvinyl acetate actually doesn't really bond to wood. It's what we put around the particles themselves. It's called polyvinyl alcohol. It's got a lot of these hydroxyl groups associated with it, right? I said, Chuck, can you make me Type Bond 2 without the polyvinyl alcohol? And he's like, I don't know. I don't know if I can or not. So he thought about it for a while. It took him 1.5 years actually to get it to me. And so we tested it. So we ran some testing, Type Bond 2 on maple, without, so the one without the polyvinyl alcohol on actually had a smaller particle size. So if it was bonding through the pores of the wood, it would go deeper into the pores, right? Because they're smaller particles. And I've got a picture of what the particles look like under our microscope. So what we found was that without the polyvinyl alcohol, we got 800 psi. With the polyvinyl alcohol, we got 4,000 psi. Okay, so what we know from that testing is that the pore bonding itself maximum is going to be 20%. But the Type Bond 2 formulation has the chemicals that cause the water resistance. They actually react to hydroxyl groups. And so because it has that contributed a little bit to it. And then polyvinyl acetate itself is a little bit. So pore bonding, I would say, is going to only be around 5 to 10% maybe of that. And so what I say to people, a lot of people call me and say, well, I like to sand to 80%. I mean, with 80 grit sandpaper, kind of rough that wood up a little bit. And get some good bites, some more pores, open that wood up a little bit. And what we found was that those bonds are actually weaker. And the reason they're weaker is because you've damaged. Go ahead and grab a sample of each, one of each back there. So you're damaging the fibers. And it's kind of like where you've got your project here and there's just a little whisker of wood and you go, oh, I can pull that right off, right? And so you pull it and it just dives right into the grain and now you got a big fix, right? And so that we find that happens. When you break those samples, they break about 20% less strength, but they have great wood failure. I mean, you get 100% wood failure in most of those cases because you're pulling the damaged fibers off of the wood. And so you get really good, it looks good, but the strength really is not there. So again, what we want to do is we want to make sure that we are bonding to cellulose. If you're using a tropical hardwood that has a lot of oil, or maybe even a cedar or a cypress that may have oil in it, we need to remove that oil because that oil is there protecting the cellulose from the bugs. And with water-based adhesives, water and oil don't mix, and so my adhesive can't get to the cellulose. I don't know why that happened. Okay.
What grit? You said
80 grit. So what we recommend, usually about 220 to 320 grit. Actually, the best surface is a nice, freshly hand-planed, nice, sharp hand-planed surface. Best surface to glue.
I've got one project that's unglued for about 3 years. Do I have to do anything to the surface of the tendons?
It's gonna, so the question was, I've got wood that's been sitting around for a while,
Assembled,
3 years,
unglued.
but unglued. And my statement is, I don't know. Because so if you had wiped it with acetone, which is what we recommend for joints that may have some oil or tannic acids or anything that's going to get in the way of the cellulose, then my statement would be is, oh yeah, you want to go ahead and wipe those again. In my case, my statement to you would be wipe it with acetone just to be sure that anything that may have bloomed back to the surface from that fresh cut. Because you got tars and you have, a lot of different stuff that's in wood that can migrate, typically will migrate to the surface.
Oily woods, when you don't remove the oil, does epoxy look better than water-based?
So in a lot of cases, epoxies also need something to bond to also. So on an oily surface, if there's a solvent in that epoxy, or the oil has the ability to dissolve what's on the wood, then yeah, it can bond better. But in a lot of cases, it still needs to get to that cellulose. Typically, it's based upon, those polar molecules that it's looking to bond to, right?
So sanding with 2000 is way.
2000 is way too much. I mean, can you? Yeah. Do you need to? No. In a lot of cases, I'll just do a 150, and usually that's fine. Again, you're not losing a whole bunch of strength, right? So let's say let's keep it in perspective, right? Type on 3, I'll get 4,000 PSI. I lose 20%. I'm still at 3,200, right? Which is still pretty much stronger than the wood that you've got anyway, right? So in some cases, sanding just takes so much time. The best way to clean the surfaces with acetone. You can use other chemicals to clean the surfaces off. We typically recommend acetone. You can use isopropyl alcohol. It'll get rid of the oils. But the problem is, in a lot of cases, if it's denatured, they've put oils into that to denature it. And now you're going to be left behind once the alcohol evaporates with more oil on the surface.
What about pure ethanol?
Pure ethanol would work. But in a lot of cases, it would have to be 200 proof. Otherwise, you're just adding some water to that too, right? So that's why we typically recommend acetone. You can use paint thinners and lacquer thinners, but be careful with those because they can have a lot of different chemicals added to that as long as it evaporates lacquer. They could put oils in it. I know one company that this was a long time ago, different company that I work for, we used to get rid of our hazardous oils and stuff. And it was a company that made lacquer thinners and things like that. And the EPA allows you to put a certain amount in there. So we paid them to take it, and then you paid them to take that. So what I say is just be a little careful with that.
That's if your wood is oily.
If your wood is oily, right. Now, a lot of people say you can't glue Ipe, right? Does everybody know what Ipe is? Yeah, beautiful wood. I had a guy call me, and he's like, he's out in Hawaii. The guy wanted cabinets that's up for a penthouse. On top of there, he wanted all Ipe cabinets and furniture and stuff. He's like, I can't mechanically fasten this. I got to be able to glue it. He says, I'm having a hard time. What glue do you have? I said, well, type on 2 or 3 will glue it. You just got to wipe it. And so I mean, if you've ever used Ipe and you've wiped it with acetone, you'll get tired of wiping it before. So what I always tell people is use a white rag, wipe it. If it comes back dirty, get the new spot on, keep wiping until the rag comes back clean, then glue it up right away. So don't wait for the acetone to evaporate because the acetone will actually help it wet the surface out a little better, right? And so it's good, you just glue it up right away and get it together because the oil will come to the surface. As soon as you get that water on the cellulose, the free cellulose, it'll keep the oil from coming to the surface because they don't like each other, right? And so I was cleaning the wood. After 45 minutes of wiping, I gave up and I just glued it anyway. And it worked great. Because you cut off the ends on the table. and they hit the floor and they all stayed together. So I always consider that successful at that point in time, because I have had them come apart. Okay, the other thing, and I don't know if this will show up. Yeah, there it is. So sometimes you'll get black glue lines. Okay, so if you're getting glue lines that have turned a black color or a purplish color, it's because you have iron contamination. Where that iron came from, I don't know. We had a guy from Canada call, and he's like, we talked for an hour and a half. You know, he was using maple, and typically you don't see that in maple. Oak is notorious for being able to pick up iron from the soil and incorporating that into the structure. And sometimes you just get a load of oak and you glue it up and all the glue lines turn black. The only thing you can do is either buy a different tree, wood from a different tree, or just change to a polyurethane. A polyurethane doesn't have the, it's reacting with the acetate group. So polyvinyl acetate, any polyvinyl acetate will release an acetic acid group off of it for hydrolyzing over time. And has anybody ever made a dye with steel wool and vinegar? Yeah, it's the same thing that occurs. It's that same iron acetate that forms. Some glues are worse than others. Typically, your water-resistant glues tend to give off more acetate than, say, like the Type 1 original that doesn't have that.
Might you get it off your clamps?
You can get it off your clamps. I had a guy who, he sanded his tabletop to get some rust off of it, and then used that same sandpaper to sand his project. And that was the one with the maple, because we were like, maple typically doesn't do that. I mean, we rarely ever see. Now, somebody did say he had a glue line that turned red. He was supposed to send some stuff in. He never sent it in. Another guy said that one of his turned, we assume it was copper. I asked him to send me some in so we could, we have all of the analytical equipment to analyze that. So if anything like that happens, a color other than black, because we know what black is. If you do see any other colors, please send it in, because we're very, very interested in that. But typically, if you're seeing that, it's due to contamination somewhere.
Is the glue that's changing color or the wood around it?
So it's forming a dye. So the polyvinyl, so the coloration is coming from acetic acid, which is usually when you make a polyvinyl acetate, some of it hydrolyzes into acetic acid. And so that acid reacts with the iron, forming a dye. And that's basically what is happening. So, and the problem is that dye is water soluble and it goes very deep into the wood. It's hard to sand off. You can get it everywhere. And that's why when you get glue on a clamp, like a bar clamp, it colors that. That's really deep in the wood, and that can be a little difficult to remove. So, but that's where it's coming from, in case you needed to know. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the gluing, right? So because edge gluing or face gluing has so much cellulose, gets to be very, very strong, right? So when you do that, clamping, let's talk a little bit about clamping. So wherever you put a clamp, you're going to get a force. Usually it's what we call the cone of force that's going off of the clamping pads themselves. Usually it's going to be 45 degrees in each direction, so about 90 degrees off of there. What you want to do is to make sure that that clamping pressure gets, evenly distributed across your piece. The reason, and I can show you an easy example of that, you clamp down a veneer, right? With just clamping, you're going to have areas that are not going to see any pressure, and you'll get bubbling in the veneer. So again, it's usually pretty good. And to get away from that, you usually put a caul on top of that, right? The caul will spread that pressure out to give you a better. Or you use a vacuum bag, which puts the pressure all over the whole surface, which is what you want in the first place, right? Let's talk about clamping pressure. What is the clamping pressure that you need? Well, talking about a vacuum bag, the maximum pressure that a vacuum bag can put on is 14 PSI, right? But it puts it on the whole surface, right? So if I put 14 pounds pressure here, it's going to spread. By the time it gets to there, that pressure is much less. So we typically recommend 100 PSI clamping pressure for, 100 on each of the clamps. For softer woods, then we recommend 150 for medium density woods, and then 200 for the high density woods. What I can tell you is we are wrong. Okay, so we had a guy call one time, and he again started. He's an engineer though, so he was really nice. He didn't say our glue sucked. He said the glue was unfortunately unable to hold the pieces together appropriately, and so he was using Jatoba. Right, so we're like, well, did you wipe it with acetone? He goes, yeah, followed everything. So eventually we ended up, if we can't come to a solution over the phone, I'm going to say, well, send me some samples. We'll take a look at it. So, and he did. He sent me some Jatoba. So we ran testing on clamping pressure. What we did was we took the two pieces, and then one of them we set a 5-pound weight on top of it. It worked out to be 0.6 psi. Over the surface. Then we used our normal clamping pressure, and then we went all the way up to 1,000 PSI because there was a paper that was put out in 1998 showing that you could go up to 1,000 PSI without affecting the strength of the bond. Then we used 3 different hardnesses of wood because he sent us the Jatoba. We're like, well, maybe it could be due to the hardness of the wood. So we ran poplar for softwood. We ran maple for medium, and then we did the Jatoba, and Jatoba is Brazilian rosewood for, one of the hardest woods that is out on the market. And what we found was that in every single case, the 5-pound weight made the strongest bond. But it varied depending on the hardness of the wood. So with the poplar, you could go from the 5-pound weight all the way up to 1,000 PSI, and you really only lost about 5 to 10% of the strength. Not much at all. With the maple, you lost 25 to 30%. With the Jatoba, we lost 50 to 100%. In some of the cases, we took them out of the clamp, and the pieces just fell apart. We couldn't even test them. So we've changed our recommendations, right? So our new recommendation is use the least amount of pressure that you need to get your pieces into the position that you need them to be when the glue dries. Now, what that means is don't crank down because a little bit is good and a lot's better, because it's not. But on the other hand, if you are using poplar, it probably doesn't matter, right? The issue comes in is if your joinery is really bad, what are you going to have to do? Extra pressure to get it into position that you want it to be, right? And this kind of, if you think about it, it's kind of a no-brainer. Better joinery tends to give you stronger joints, right? So it all works the same way. So again, just note that when you are clamping, you do not need a lot of clamping pressure. Now, the next thing is, well, how long do I need to keep it in the clamps? So this is the part where we talk about glue drying, right? And now you won't fall asleep. So this is actually a picture. Let me see if I can. This is actually a picture of the particles under a microscope. Yes, question?
Yeah, before you go on, so is the excess clamping pressure starving the joint of glue, or is it forcing it out of there?
We believe it is. We believe it is. And the reason we don't have an electron microscope, so so the question was, do you believe that the extra pressure is causing the glue joints to be starved? And my statement is yes, we believe that is the case. And what we believe is because wood moves, right? I mean, wood will naturally move with changes in moisture, is that when you have a joint with the very, very thin glue lines, which is what you get under high pressure, when the joint moves, there's not a lot of movement that it can do before you stress the polymers themselves, right? So the thicker that what we also found is the thicker the glue line up to a certain point, the stronger it gets, right? So let's say and we'll go through one-sided, two-sided gluing, but if you put together a piece and it's not quite right and you have to take it apart and you put a little more glue on, that's actually a stronger joint than if you just did that. I mean, the glue lines look ugly, they're thick and stuff.
Are you changing the cell size of the wood fibers?
We don't have a electron microscope, so we were do that. But I think what it is it's the alignment of polymer. It's kind of like with nylon, if you stretch it, it aligns the polymers and the polymer gets stronger. So we believe that if the glue is allowed to stretch a little more, the polymers will tend to align better and give you a little more strength as those, say the hydroxyl groups kind of crystallize a little bit more as they're stretched. That's what we believe, that's our hypothesis. The problem is, how do I test that, right? So, okay. So basically this is what the glue looks like under a microscope, and you just need 10,000 strength to see that. In the middle of these polymers is the polyvinyl acetate. Around the outside, this darker portion, that's the polyvinyl alcohol. That's actually what sticks to the wood, to the cellulose. So all that happens when you put the glue on the wood is, again, just little balls of plastic that float in water. They get closer, closer, and closer together until they touch. Everybody's rubbed glue between their fingers. Very slippery. But then after a period of time, it starts to what I call putty up. If you took that glue, once it's puttied up, put it on a piece of wood, clamped it together, you'd have no strength. And the reason for that is the glue cannot flow, right? So the glue has to be able to flow to the surface to get more of that contact with the hydroxyl groups, right? And so there becomes a point where the glue will no longer be able to wet the surface, right? And that's where we come in with our open time and total assembly time. But the point where that reaches is theoretically, if they were all the same size, theoretically that would be 67% solids, right? Because you can fill a jar with marbles and still put in a third of the water, right? And so most of the wood glues, Type on Original, Type on 2, Type on 3, are usually about 50% solids, right around there. Some a little bit less, but for the most part, 50% solids. So you have 17% moisture to work with before that glue starts. Now the speed set that you have, or the quick and thick, which I gave out the last time, both of those glues set fast because they're 60% solids. So you only have 7% water to work with. Now, as soon as you put the glue on the wood, and everybody's done that, put glue on the wood and then try to spread it with your finger, you feel it draggy, right? Well, that means that the glue has already puttied up on the surface of the wood. So already you're getting a glue line forming. So what we do is typically, and most of the information, I mean, it's already an eye chart on these bottles. I mean, we get people saying, well, why did you put that on the label? And we're like, have you tried to read those things? You know, because we're required to put Spanish on and a lot of other things. And so we can't put everything on the label. We do have everything, though, on our website, www.typeon.com, which is actually on the back of the bottle, along with my phone number in case you have any questions. You can just call me and ask me. I'll be happy to answer your questions. But what we have is what is called open time. Open time is where two things are happening. One is the wood is sucking the moisture out of the wood, out of the glue, and the air is evaporating it, right? So once you get the pieces of wood together, that stops the evaporation. Once you get the pieces together, now you're worried about what's called the total assembly time. And that's the time that you have to get it in the clamps before the glue starts to set. And if you've ever used Type on 2, you will know that that occurs pretty quick, right? So 5 minutes open time, 10 to 15. This gentleman here sent me, this is a newel post from a stairway, just for everybody to see. Obviously, it was a lot longer at one time. But he, again, this call actually did start off with my glue sucked. And that's where I kind of get this phrase from, because I was kind of laughing at the guy. But he sent me the sample. I mean, we couldn't figure out what it was, what the problem was. He said, I've been in this for 30 years and I've never had a problem with gluing. And I'm like, I know how to glue and I have problems all the time gluing. And so, I mean, so don't run that one by me because I know better. But anyway, so he sent it in, and what we found was, in this particular case, I can tell you exactly what happened. He has 4 pieces of wood, 1, 2, 3, and 4. He was a single-sided gluer, put the glue on this side. Then he put the glue on this side. Then he put the glue on this piece. Okay, the reason I know that is because the glue dried and had very little transfer to this piece over here. Then on this one, this was the second one because there was some transfer to this piece, and you can feel, some of the wood failure on this piece. This one, I couldn't get apart. Now, what I can tell you is, if I can't get one of these apart, and the glue has worked in one of your joints, it's something you're doing, because if it was my glue, it wouldn't work in any of your joints. Yes? Agree? Right? My glue is not smart enough to play tricks on you and go, I am going to bond here, but I'm not going to bond here. This is going to be funny. The call, I'm going to wait for that call to come in, right? And so that's not the case. So that's why if you call me and you say, hey, it didn't glue, my joints fell apart, my statement's going to be back to you. Take some scrap pieces of wood, put some glue on it, clamp it together right away. What that does is it keeps me from looking at this going, that's a lot of square foot area for type bond 2 to cover before that glue is going to set on you, right? This way, it's a small piece, you get it together. Then I'll tell you, clamp it overnight, take it out in the morning and break it with a hammer. If you get wood failure, it's your problem. If you don't get wood failure, let's talk, call me back. And so I've never had anybody call me back, just so you know. Now, I did have a gentleman. This one was actually, again, he started off with, I've been doing this for 30 years, never had a problem. It's the glue. And so I said, and we couldn't come to a thing. He said, so I glued this together, tapped it lightly with a hammer. And if you see closely, you can see his light, his light hammer marks on there. And he was right. The piece came apart, except for actually glued in the dominoes. But I will tell you that we did not find any glue on the gluing surface. So there was no glue on here. But what I can tell you is if you don't use our glue, it will not bond. Okay, so the next question really comes in is one-sided or two-sided gluers. So who here is a single-sided gluer? Raise your hand. Two-sided gluers, raise your hand. Everybody's correct. Now, there are positives and negatives, benefits and detractors from each of the methods, right? So if you are a single-sided gluer, you're putting glue on one side, that glue better be wet enough to bond the next side before you get it together. So you better be very quick. Again, most of the problems we ever have is with type on 2 on single-sided gluers. But it is the only way, and if you really look at this glue line, it's very pretty. You get these glue lines that are almost invisible that you can't see. That's the only way you're going to get an invisible glue line, because as a two-sided gluer, you're putting glue on two sides, forming two glue lines. So the glue lines are always going to be twice as thick when you get it together. And you're going to use probably twice as much glue. We actually thank you for that. And you're going to get it running all over the place. But as a two-sided gluer, you're going to have a lot of time, because all you need for glue to work is for a liquid surface to be mobile when you glue it together. With a two-sided gluing, you've assured that you have the glue all wetted out on one side. The glue is already wetted out on the other side. All I need is a layer that is liquid, and I'm going to get a good bond. Now, as a single-sided gluer, you're not as assured always, because you don't know. Because if I've got a very long board, I started gluing here, and by the time I got to this end, that glue is drier than this end, right? And so I put them together, get them all together, And then I saw this end off and the boards fall apart as I'm sawing those ends off, and this one's just fine. And you go, that's the glue's problem, isn't it? I better call. But what's nice is, and let me just borrow your. So the recommended is 250 square feet per gallon of the amount of glue you put on. It doesn't matter, right? So, but these brushes, the bristles and the spacing are designed to give you the right amount, right? What's great about this is when you're gluing, you put your bottle in this hand, you squeeze out as you put it down, and then as you get to the end, you just do a final wipe. You've just got a fresh surface on the glue. Get your boards together, clamp them together. You will always be successful. And the only way to get those, you see the magazines come out where they're talking, they got the big glue article and they show these little tiny pearls of glue, not the glue running all over the place like most of my glue ups are. But that's the only way to get those. And now that I've started using those brushes, I get hardly any squeeze out whatsoever. So if you haven't used those brushes, use them. They're wonderful. Questions at this point in time?
So do you do two or one?
It depends on the project that I'm doing. So if I've got
Small?
usually small, I can get the glue on fast, and usually I'm just a one-sided gluer. Normally I'll just do one side, unless it's going to take a little bit longer. So even with type on 3, which has got 10 minutes of open time, 20 to 25 minutes to get it in the clamps. If I've got a lot of pieces that I'm putting together, right? I've got Morrison tendons, a bunch of those, and I get this and that, and then I got to put them together, and then I got to square and all of that. I'll put a lot of glue in. Usually I'll put more glue in and give me more time in that particular case.
Plywood edge to a solid piece of wood.
So plywood is difficult, right? Because so yes. So when we talk about plywood, you are always gluing, especially if you're doing the edge of half of that is always end grain. The glue end grain is to take the glue, put it on, press it in with your finger, then put another bead of glue on. Because what you want to do is you want to keep from getting a starved glue joint by all the glue getting sucked into the end grain, right? And so you have to satisfy the end grain first, which is pushing glue into it until it no longer accepts more glue. Then when I glue, I now have glue in the joint itself.
That's what they taught us at South Hennepin Tech, the cabinet making program. So they taught us something right.
Yes.
Well, hallelujah.
Woo! Now, the other thing is a lot of them will teach you to put it on the end grain, wipe it in, and then wait, and then put some more on.
You don't want to wait too long.
Don't wait.
No.
Don't wait. There's no waiting necessary.
Bob,
Question.
somebody asked on Zoom what kind of brushes they are. They're brushes that are made by you guys.
Yeah, so it's our tight brush, and they are. I'm going to have some. If you come in, we still have some. Yeah. So that's the brush. Now, what's nice about our brushes is they come with a fanned out edge. These are scrapers on this side. So for scraping up any squeeze out, they're flared so that you can get into the corners. Some of the other brushes that are flared in, you can't get them into the corner. So again, these are very nice brushes if you don't have any. I recommend 4 or 5, so you'll have to invite me again a couple times.
Sir, you're talking about us having a problem getting it together fast enough, and tonight you gave us some.
Speed set, yes. Yeah. Today we gave out samples of speed set. Speed set. This is not a product I would use if I have more than one glue joint to put together at a time. Now, what this is really good at is if you cannot clamp something, this sets so fast that just holding it for 15 seconds, you can let it go. And then it'll dry all on its own. Usually it builds strength fast enough that it will, how do you say, fixture it in place. Now, if you grabbed it and pulled on it, obviously you could pull it apart. The strength isn't high, but it's enough to hold its own weight, is what it is. And it's similar to our, the last time I gave a presentation, we gave out the quick and thick, right? So this is what I would call quick and thin. So they're both thin. Now this one comes with a UV dye. So if you use a black light and shine it on it, it'll fluoresce. So if you're going to stain something, you can just use a black light to look if you got to still continue to sand out any squeeze out yet from there. So that does give you a little bit of difference from the other ones.
Weaker than Jake Bond 3.
This is actually our strongest glue, 4,000 PSI, 4,100 PSI. So this is actually our strongest glue. It doesn't have, so the Quick and Thick has a monomer in there that causes it to be softer to allow for flexibility, because it was our old molding and trim glue. Okay, so with molding and trim, if I'm gluing a side piece of molding onto a cabinet, right, that cabinet wood is moving this way, right? But that molding piece, since it's in the longitudinal direction, isn't going to move at all, right? So remember how some woodworkers would do a sliding dovetail kind of setup to allow it to, for the movement? Our glue is designed so you don't have to do that. You can actually just glue the trim right to the wood. So it allows for that movement. It's soft enough to expand and contract quite a bit, actually. It's very stretchable.
So like with the mortise and tenon, like how tight does that have to be at enough of a?
I got a slide on that. So mortise and tenon, we're going to talk about. Question?
Might be jumping ahead too, but from a glue standpoint, is it better to wipe up the squeeze out, like dig a brag right away?
And I got a slide for that also.
All right, cool.
Okay.
Dominoes.
So we're going to talk about joints. Okay, so it was a good segue. Thank you. Thank you, by the way. So mortise and tenon joints will tend to be the toughest joint to glue. A couple of reasons. If I have a mortise and tenon joint that is very, very tight, right, that I kind of have to hammer in place, I can glue that with water and it won't come apart. Agree or disagree? For today. Right? And why is that? Remember we talked about wood, how changes in thickness and all that. So the wood will start to swell with the water, which will lock that piece in place. So if I take wood glue, water-based wood glue, and glue that together on a tight-fitting joint, slam it together, all of the glue gets squeezed off of the joint, and it fits pretty good, feels tight. Is it glued? Yeah. I don't know. I don't know. Is it because the tenon swelled? You scraped off most of the glue because it was so tight that all of the glue kind of got, smushed off, right? I mean, it got squeegeed off. In a lot of cases, that would be no. It is not glued well together at all. Now, if it is too loose and I glue it together, joint swells again, and it fits, seems to be pretty tight and good, right? But the problem is water-based wood glues are 50% solids. So the glue is going to shrink. The problem with a mortise and tenon, and we're going to talk about chairs mostly because that tends to be your what we get calls for repairing all the time, right? So a mortise and tenon on a chair is going to see a lot of racking force on it. Any movement of that joint will cause either the glue to break or the fibers to tear, which means you'll get a little bit more movement the next time, more tear, until eventually that joint will fall apart. So what's the best way of gluing a mortise and tenon, right? So I had a rocking chair and the joints were a little bit loose. So, and we don't make this type of glue, but I used an epoxy. And the reason I used an epoxy was it was capable of filling gaps without shrinking, which supported the whole joint. Okay? And that's what you want on a chair. You do not want any movement whatsoever on those mortise and tenons. Now, the epoxies you can buy with a relatively long working time. Of course, they take forever to cure all the way. That wasn't a big deal for me on that particular instance. So again, mortise and tenon is probably your toughest. Your toughest in terms of trying to figure out how to glue those. Now, a lot of people, they get the, how'd you say, the feel that if they make them really, really nice and tight, that's good woodworking, right? And yes, it's a great joiner to be able to get those to fit that way. But in terms of being able to get those to glue together well and hold for the long period, right? I make a chair, like the rocking chair or the chairs that they have in the pyramids. I want my chair to last 3,000 or more years, right? Okay, maybe not that long. But we don't want to have it sent to the repair shop early, right? And we find a lot of this stuff that you get from China typically has to be repaired. And then the reason is the joints typically don't fit all that well. So my recommendation for a mortise and tenon, make them a tiny bit loose and use an epoxy.
What about like dominoes?
We're going to get to those. The next one that we're going to talk about is a dovetail. A dovetail joint, if you get your pins and tails in the right order, don't ask me why I know this. For some reason, I don't know why, every time I do a dovetail joint, I do one backwards. I don't know why, but anyway, so as long as you get your in the right area, a dovetail joint is mechanically locking, correct? Do I have to glue every surface of that joint? What does the glue do? The glue holds it so that, all the glue needs to do is hold it together so that when your kids shove more socks in the drawer, they don't pop out the sides, right? Because in most of the areas where the force is going to be, you've locked it mechanically. That's what that joint is for. So I've watched videos of people putting glue, and they've been using Type-On 2, right? And I'm watching the guys put glue on every single tail and pin, sorry, thank you. Pin and tail. And I'm like, yeah, that one's dry, that one's dry, that one's dry. But he puts it together, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You just need a drop of glue on each of the pins and then pop it together. That's all you need. It locks it, like I said, if you got your pins and tails. Now, if you got your pins and tails wrong, make sure you put glue on every single surface, because the angle that it is to pull out easily, right? That's what I got figured. So let's talk about dowels, biscuits, and dominoes, right? Dominoes. Dominoes. No, I'm good. I'm good. So the issue comes in is all of those, if I'm gluing edge to edge, do I need them? Depends on why. If I'm using them to, how do you say, alignment purposes so I can get the joints together quicker, benefit. Do I need to glue in any of the pins in any of those? No, they don't need to be glued in. As a matter of fact, on those edge to edge, dominoes and dowels tend to weaken the joint because I have just drilled out a third of the wood so that only needs to pop through, which is how they fail, pop through a third of the wood, right? And so in a lot of cases, if you're doing edge to edge or face to face, you don't need them. They're okay. But if you have end grain to side grain or end grain to face grain, yes. And the reason what you're doing there is you are increasing the side grain to side grain content of that joint, and that will cause it to be stronger. And that becomes, you know, because this is what I call a cheaper method of making a tongue and groove, right? I mean, mortise and tenon, thank you. And so in those cases, this was face to face, right? This was face to face. All you actually needed to do was actually put glue on the gluing surfaces, and that would have been as strong in that particular case, right? And so I don't typically recommend it unless they're helping you in some way to get the joints together faster. The faster you get your glue joints together, the stronger they will be. The less chance that you're going to go past that open or working time on the adhesive. Make sense? Not a lot of people do cold press, so we're not going to bore you. We talked about end grain gluing. I mean, and this is pictures. I mean, you can see it. It's mostly air that you're trying to glue. So, and that's why it's not strong. Very little cellulose to bond to. So let's talk about some of the tips on gluing. So temperature, you want to really keep the glue from freezing. And the reason is, especially those high solids ones. This one, if you freeze it once, it's going to be toast. So keep it indoors. Or get yourself a glue fridge, glue fridge. So and the reason for that is when these products freeze, again, microscopic balls of plastic float in water. When ice crystals start to form, ice likes to be attached to more water, right, to form more ice. They don't like to incorporate these particles in the water crystal, and so they start to push them out of the crystal, right? And eventually they start to get pushed together. This stuff is glue. The particles like to stick together. As a matter of fact, they are designed to stick together. And so after a freeze, they will be lightly put together. Higher the solids, the harder they're going to get pushed together. So quick and thick, speed set, not very good with freezing. Now, type on 2, type on 3, and type on original will take a freeze thaw, in some cases up to 5 freeze thaw cycles. We don't recommend it, and every bottle will say do not freeze on it. So again, if it's frozen once, bring it aside. Rule of thumb, if you thaw it out and you put a stick in there and you have a hard time getting the stick in, it's probably not good. If the stick goes in real easy and you can mix it up, rule of thumb is it's good. And so, go by that. If it looks like wood glue, it's going to react like wood glue. Question?
An old bottle.
Old bottle.
Don't use very much, and the top gets really brown. And you dig that out, is the rest still good?
So yes and no. So it's going to depend. Type on 3, which is I think because that has a tendency to turn the brown color on the top. Type on 3. As long as when you open the bottle and you smell it and it doesn't smell like vinegar, you're good to go. Type on 2 and type on 3 over time, and we'll talk a little bit about shelf life here. As a matter of fact, let's move on to the next one.
And if it feels like it's drying, can you add water?
You can always add 5% water to any of our glues without affecting the strength.
By weight or volume?
Yes. You get to choose. It doesn't matter. They're typically very close to the amount. Every 5% above that will reduce the viscosity by half normally and reduce the strength by about 10 to 15%. So again, you can add a lot of water without reducing the strength of the glue very much. Again, if you're using domestic hardwoods or even pine, pine's going to break at a pretty low strength. But the problem is we design these glues to not run all over the place, right? Because you need a certain amount of glue in the glue line so you don't squeeze them out, right? So we don't typically recommend it. Now, every bottle has a moisture vapor transmission rate, which means the glue will dry out even if everything is all closed up, right? And so eventually they're going to thicken up on you. The non-water resistant glues. So most of our glues have a 2-year official shelf life. What I will tell you is you guys really don't care about our official shelf life. My lawyers do. What you care about is what is the usability of the glue, right? How long does it remain usable? So usually a non-reactive, or what I call non-water resistant glue, usually about 10 years. And in some cases, you'll have to add water after 10 years, and then you'll still be able to use it. Just need to mix it. It will settle a little bit. So those larger particles will settle to the bottom. The smaller ones will settle to the top. And so if you don't mix it, when you use it, you're using something we've never designed to use. Now, will it glue? Absolutely. It's got polyvinyl alcohol on the outside, which is going to glue to the cellulose of the wood. Will it work? Yeah. How good will it work? That I couldn't tell you. So usually if it's been sitting a while, mix it. Now you're saying to me, well, how do you mix that? Because I can't shake it. It doesn't shake. I mean, I hear nothing when I do that. Typically you want to put a stick in there If you get one twice as tall as the bottle, you can use that little opening as a fulcrum, and then you can use your fingers as a squeegee, right? And you get a little glue on your fingers. Don't do that. We do not recommend that.
So if you put a bottle of glue in a glass jar, with a lid on it, would that extend, now you don't have that moisture vapor transmission through the plastic?
It won't dry out, but you can always add water. So it really doesn't matter. I mean, usually it takes about 10 years to really dry out through here. Now, type on 2 and 3, because they're reactive, goes through a chemical reaction in the bottle.
So it's a chemistry thing changing that.
Not with a non-reactive. A non-reactive, it's all just moisture leaving the bottle. With type on 2 or 3, it's a chemical reaction where the polyvinyl acetate in there hydrolyzes into polyvinyl alcohol and it'll turn to a gel. Over time, usually about 4 to 5 years at room temperature. If you put it in your fridge, remember we talked about a glue fridge, 10 years. I've seen bottles 10 years still usable, refrigerated.
What about heat?
Heat is horrible for glue. So if you store it in a hot, so what we find is type on 2 and 3 stored down in Florida or Texas in their garages, they may get 2 years out of it. Usually it's barely a little over 2 years and it's toast at that point in time. So keep it cool if you can.
So you put any shipping requirements when you send that stuff out from the factory, you know?
Oh yeah,
Minnesota?
yeah. In the winter we have to send out heated trucks, and we typically will. They'll do the heated trucks, but oh yeah, we shoved it in our warehouse for a week. That's not temperature control, and we get glue coming back all the time that is frozen. I mean, it's just the nature of that shipping during the cold months. We had to take back a whole truckload of stuff going to Japan, froze on the way over. A whole truckload of stuff, all the way from Japan. That was expensive. So
if you refrigerate it, you need to bring it back up to room temperature.
no.
My
So
experience when it's cold, it doesn't seem to want to come out.
okay, so you are correct. The cooler it is, the higher the viscosity will be. But what I will say is, so the other part of this is called the chalk temperature, right? So we saw on there chalk temperature. So this is the formula for type on original. I'll wait. But anyway, so what happens is, you have the little particles, but then they have to coalesce into a film, right? So what you're looking at for the glue to work well is that it has to melt into a film. Each of the formulations of the glue will have a different melting temperature, and that's called the chalk point. Anything below that, the glue will tend to chalk or not melt together, and we'll get the little particles will freeze dry, basically is what it is. And you'll end up with a chalky mess. Every bottle has that. This particular one says 59 degrees. So if you use it below 59 degrees, you're going to have some problems. Type bond original, I think, is 65. Type bond 2, type bond 3 is 40. So 40 is typically the lower one that you can get normally for it to work. Now, if you have an unheated shop and you're in the winter, remember, your wood has to be also above that temperature because the glue is very little mass. It will quickly get to the temperature of the wood. We usually have problems, and they start in October, usually start in Canada, and work their way down every winter as we get calls. As a matter of fact, 3 years ago, down in Texas, we were getting calls from Louisiana. We never get calls from Louisiana for chalking. And they're like, well, I don't have heat in my shop. What am I supposed to do? What you can do, go to the Goodwill store, buy you some electric heated blankets, wrap your wood in it, get it up to temperature, glue it up, put your clamps on it, drape the blankets back over it. All it has to do is be above that temperature during that drying process. Once it's dry, it doesn't matter. Once it has coalesced into a film, you can let it go down. So this is what it looks like when it chalks. Actually, you can see the larger particles here and the smaller ones there. They actually remain as little tiny pieces of, and it gets dusty. That's why we call it chalk point.
Said at one point in time that your tight bond will become jello like or
It will gel. Type on 2 and 3 will gel over time.
and can you pull off that gel and still use what's below it? Or do you throw out the bottle?
I would throw it away. And the reason is because normally it tends to start to hydrolyze, turning into polyvinyl alcohol. Now, the polyvinyl alcohol is a very good adhesive, right? We saw that. Is because it's got a lot of the hydroxyl groups on there. The problem is it doesn't flow well. Those gels just don't flow well. So if you can pull it off and it's still milky and flowable underneath, yeah. But again, what I'll tell you is, what is the cost of the wood for your project versus a bottle of this? I mean, and I understand you don't want to waste it and stuff, and we don't want you guys to waste it either. And so that's why my statement. So how do you know how old your bottle is? Everybody got their bottle? Pull it up. I'm going to show you the date code on here and how to read it. Now, people will call us all the time and say, well, why don't you put an expiration date on the bottle? And we don't want to, because we don't want you guys throwing it away. It's kind of like milk in your fridge, right? 1 minute after midnight, it doesn't go bad, all of a sudden like that, right? It's a process, and it depends on the temperature that it has seen over time, right? So that A stands for Made in America. All of our glues are made in the United States, in Columbus, Ohio. We do have a plant in China, but the plant in China because we have exported all of our furniture industry business over to China. So it's hard to ship 50% water overseas. So we had to put a plant in over there to be cost effective for the glue. The next 2 digits are for the year. In this case, it's 25 for 2025. Next 2 for the month, 05 for May. Next 2 are for the day of the month, 20 for a manufactured date of May 20th, 2025. Probably the freshest glue you're ever going to get, because I get it right out of the warehouse. And then the last 3 digits are a batch number for that day. So this was the 165th batch made that day. Okay.
Show that on your website?
We do actually, under the frequently asked questions section. So it is on our website. Most of this whole presentation can be found in those frequently asked questions.
So you have a half a bottle and you decide, well, I ripped all that crap out of there. I'm going to throw it away. How do you throw it away?
So the issue with throwing this away, and we've all heard of microplastics, right? Right? Microplastics. What did I show you under the microscope? Microscopic balls of plastic that float in water. So that's what this stuff is. If you throw it away and water gets to it, it will turn the water cloudy and will wash down into the drains, and eventually that will end up in the environment. Best to just squirt it out and let it dry. Once it's dry, then you can throw it away. It's a piece of plastic at that point in time. So that's the best way. Now, what do most people do? Yeah, they'll throw it in the trash. Keep the bottle on tight though, so it doesn't leak out. Usually the bottles are pretty resistant to,
Rinse the bottle out.
well, once you rinse it, you're throwing it down the drain anyway, right? If you rinse it out, it's going down the drain, and then now you got microplastics in the environment. Let it dry out. Yeah, best way is just let it dry out.
Squirt it out, let it dry, throw it away.
Yep. I know it's a lot to do, but what I'm trying to tell you is typically you don't have to do that if you're going to use it. And like I said, the non-reactive ones will last you 10 years. If you've got an 8-ounce bottle that's lasting you 10 years, my statement is you need more projects. I mean, right? So my statement is don't throw it out, try and get to use it. But if it turns into a gel, note that the polyvinyl alcohol does not turn into a microplastic. It's actually can be a food source for bacteria, and they break it down once it's a gel. Okay. So again, we want you guys to get the most use out of these bottles. We talked about clamping time, humidity, moisture control. We talked about clamping pressure, joint design, cleanup. So one of the best ways to clean the glue, have you guys heard of Harp Design? They used to do the Fixer Upper. They were the guys who did the furniture for Fixer Upper. Clint, yes. And we saw a video on YouTube. Somebody sent us the video and said, is this the way you guys want to clean up squeeze out? So we watched the video and he's doing this. It's got to be 8-quarter walnut. I mean, gorgeous pieces of wood. And I mean, he's got dominoes in it. He's squirting glue all over the place. And we're like, oh, my kids can go to college. I mean, it's running all over the place, right? And he's filling up every single domino bit. Now, the thing I want to caution you guys on putting glue into the holes there, and again, this was a tabletop, is that, remember we talked about sunken glue joints? I've seen people put biscuits in, put glue in there, sand that tabletop, and in 5 years or so, you see a divot wherever each of the dominoes are, or where every biscuit is in that table, because of the same thing that happens. You put the glue in there, it's going to swell the wood. I sand it before. Now, on this 8-quarter table, my statement is, if you wanted to be sure you weren't going to get sunken joints because of that, how long would you have to air dry 8-quarter to get all the moisture back out? Or more, right? So again, not always a good idea to put a lot of glue in of wood because it's going to swell, and that may affect the finish at a later time once it fully equilibrates back out. So anyway, so in this video, after he gets them clamped together, he reaches his hand up and somebody from off screen throws him a rag, and you can hear it just go splat in his hand. There's so much water in it, it's dripping down, and he starts wiping up the glue. And the old timers where I work, we're all like, oh my God, you know, it's going to go into the pores of the wood. He's going to have a hard time sanding it. The stain's going to look awful, blah, blah, blah. So I was like, well, why? And they're like, well, you know, it's going to go in. I'm like, have you guys tested that? They're like, well, no. So we tested it. So I should have been born in Missouri, you know, show me state. So what we found was, we tested a couple things. One was where we took the wet rag and just kind of wiped it up, and then took the sloppy rag and just kind of wiped the surface off. Then we did what we typically recommend, which is to wait about 15 minutes. Once the glue gets to its putty state, remember putty state, it can't flow any longer. So you just scrape it up. It looks like it rolls all over the wood and gets all over the place, but remember, it can't flow any longer because it's in its putty state. Yes, it's still soft, but as you scrape it, it just rolls on the surface. The other one is we let it dry overnight and then scrape the glue off. We were taking chunks of wood up. Don't do that. I mean, don't do that. I mean, our tools were not sharp enough because everybody abuses our tools in the lab. So we never have a sharp chisel. But yeah, it was horrible. I mean, we were taking chunks of wood up as we were trying to scrape the glue off. So to test it, we took a sander with we actually used 150 grit with a 5-pound weight on it, and ran it for a minute on the wood. We actually had to change to every 10 seconds because we found that the one with the water actually only took 50 seconds to sand it enough to get everything off the surface and ready to stain. The scrape, wait till it putties up and then scrape off, it actually took us 1 minute and 10 seconds. And so both can be used. It's really what you guys want to do. But if you've kind of said, no, I don't want to use a wet rag because it might, you know, soak into the surface, don't worry about that. It doesn't. It comes kind of right up. So it works pretty good. Okay, so let's get to the 5 steps of gluing, which is what this presentation was all about. And I had to give you all of the other stuff, or otherwise we'd be spending all of our time on these just a couple of 5 slides. So one of the things, you want to do a dry fit. And the reason you want to do a dry fit is what we get most of our calls for. And the reason we want to do that and for all of you guys on the screen there, so you can kind of see that picture. Believe it or not, we get at least 1 to 2 calls a day for people asking us, well, how do you get the glue back apart? And so the questions I'm going to ask you are a couple things. And the reason I'm asking you these is because some of these are not going to be good answers once you tell me. So we want to know what type of joint it is and then what type of glue, right? So we're looking for weaknesses here, right? You know, is it a water resistant glue? Well, if it's not, I can use a little water to help get it apart, especially say like a hide glue. Is it heat resistant, solvent resistant, shock resistance? Like the CA glues tend to get brittle over time. And as a matter of fact, that is one of the turning guys who use it to glue theirs to the metal, what do you call that? The plate or something, yeah. You can take a ball peen hammer and just pop it onto that plate and it'll shatter the glue and the thing will come right off. And so we're looking for weaknesses in what you've put together. But if I've got a pegged mortise and tenon joint, my answer to you is probably not what you wanted to hear in the first place. You'd probably have to drill them out and hopefully get all of the drilling out. You're going to be cutting new joints in this particular case. If it is a miter joint and you've used quick and thick, which tends to be not as heat resistant as the other glues, a hairdryer, warming it up, pulling it apart, works just fine. If you've taken a dovetail joint and put glue on every single gluing surface, again, my answer is probably not what you want to hear also. So again, just to in itself, obviously some of them are going to be harder to get apart than others. We're going to look at the type of glue, right? Our CA glues, our instant bonds. Urethanes tend to be pretty tough to get apart.
If you do get it apart, you have to get rid of all the glue because it sticks to itself.
I have a slide for that. And I didn't hire him, by the way. Great segue, though. So you'll end up basically just kind of wrestling with the joint, trying to get it apart in the best way that you can, looking for what is the weakness of the glue. The question is in most cases, sorry. Can you reglue it? So the question is if you get it together relatively, and get it apart relatively quickly, and we did this. So our control is, this is the control. This is an epoxy, right? This is with type on 2 and then epoxy afterwards. So as you can tell, this is our control where we just glued them up. Well, then we bonded it, waited 5 minutes for the glue to kind of set. We had to kind of pull them apart. They were a little tough to pull apart, but able to pull them apart. And then we re-glued them. In a lot of cases, you get actually if you wait 17 hours, which we waited overnight. In this particular case, after the 5 minutes, then we waited and then sanded it down and then re-glued. You see that you start to lose strength once the glue dries. But again, keep this in perspective, right? If I lose a couple percentage, not a big deal, right? If I bond this by sanding it, even 22% or 25% strength. Again, not a big deal. I mean, if I'm at 4,000 PSI or 3,600, close enough to 4,000 because the math is easier in my head. If I'm at 4,000, I lose 25%. It's 1,000, I'm still 3,000 PSI. Think about that. Think about 3,000 PSI, 1 square inch, put a hook on the wall, hang my car on it. Right? So in a lot of cases, 3,000 is pretty strong. Now, if it's a chair that is going to see a lot of racking force on it, maybe not, right? So again, we want to just be cognizant of what are we trying to glue together. We choose our joinery based upon the project's ability to withstand the stresses that are expected, even if we don't think it needs to, because the kids will jump on it, right? So again, we want to just be cognizant. We choose our joinery correctly based on that. The glue is there to assist in that. Right? Question?
I didn't see type on 3 on that list.
We tested with 2. But the assumption is again, they're just microscopic balls of plastic that float in water. And the difference between type on 2 and 3. Okay. So type on 2 and 3 are made with the same base resin system. Okay. Type on 3 will pass a boiling water soak, whereas type on 2 will not. The only difference. Who here boils your furniture? Raise your hand. So in most cases, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Who makes cutting boards though? Who has one gone through a dishwashing cycle? Type on 3 will stay together in a dishwashing cycle. Easier to fix a finish than it is to fix the board. Okay, so type on 3 for cutting boards. Yes, there's a reason that makes sense to have a glue that will give you, hot water, boiling water resistance. Now, the advantage of 3 is we add, so there's a phenolic resin we add to it to give it that extra boiling water soak. Actually, the temperature of the boiling water actually cures the phenolic resin on the process of boiling. So it really doesn't give you boiling water soak resistance if you've kept it at room temperature. I mean, after about 3 to 4 months, it does react slowly. And the reason is because if you have a very reactive phenolic resin added to it, then your shelf life goes all to hell. Right? So we have to have a relatively non-reactive, and the boiling water test itself cheats itself, where now it cures and gives us the water resistance. So just by being in the dishwasher itself makes the glue stronger. Not a recommendation.
Are you gonna tell us how to use that glue where you put some stuff on it and spray it?
So that's the CA glues. So CA glues are 2-ethyl cyanoacrylate glues. They're actually a reactive solvent. It's actually just a solvent that connects together through a reaction. All of those are kept from reacting in the bottle by adding an acid to it. That's the inhibitor. It's called the inhibitor in a CA glue. Our CA glue, because they're very expensive, right? Small bottle, $20, it's expensive. We don't want it to solidify on your shelf. So we put a lot of inhibitor in it. So in cases where you are using that glue on say like an epoxy, on an oak that may have high tannic acid, the glue may not react at all and may not solidify. So that's where the spray comes in. So the spray, it's again, not scientifically big deal. The spray is heptane, which is a solvent with it added to it. The amine neutralizes the acid in the glue, causing it to react immediately. Now, if we know this, all you need to do is put it on an alkaline surface. If your surface is acidic, all you have to do is neutralize that acid on that surface. You can use baking soda and water. You can use Windex with ammonia D. Don't use the one with vinegar because that's just more acid. So all you're doing is trying to neutralize the acid in the glue and it will kick over. Now, if you use too much alkaline, it can cause it to cure too fast. Curing too fast can cause it to be a little brittle. The slower it reacts, actually, the better you are. You get kind of longer chains.
So I usually see somebody, they'll put the stuff on and they'll just go and be done.
Yes. So the spray is neutralizing.
The spray
is neutralizing the acid. So once it starts reacting, once it starts a reacted site, it'll react all the way through. So it doesn't actually need to be. You can put your stuff together, get it where you want, and then spray it. And then it'll start to react. So you're okay that way. That's what's nice about ours is real nice because you get a lot more time to get them into the right position. If you've used any of those CA glues, which are very fast reacting, you'll be very disappointed because what happens is as soon as you touch them together, they're done. I mean, you can't move them any longer. And because I shake a little bit, my thing usually starts off this way and it needs to be this way, right? So but if you buy our stuff and don't have a spray, you can use anybody else's spray because they all work the same. Or just call us, we'll send you one. I mean, but you really need to get one. If somebody is selling you ours without a spray, they're not doing you a service.
Or you.
Okay?
They're not doing
Our glue is a favor, yeah. Well, they're not doing it because you're going to be very disappointed. And so you're going to have spent a lot of money for something that's not working for you correctly. So, but we'll send you a bottle. Just again, 800 number, ask for Bob. If I'm not there, say, well, Bob said that you'd send me a sample. And that gets you a sample right away, just so you know, because I'm the manager and I don't know why they're. The other thing is you want to prepare your accessories and stuff. Make sure you have everything, right? You want, make sure you have the correct glue, make it sure it's in good condition. I mean, even I've gone through the fact that, I got my glue bottle and I open it up and I go, and it comes out of a little string and then it clogs and I'm like, make sure everything's in good working order. If you're ever unsure about your glue, right? Let's say my glue is 20 years old and actually we had a bottle of high glue that one of the old guys retired and he had a bottle of high glue in his desk. It was 25 years old. So he tested it. So after 25 years, there was a difference with the high glue. It stayed a little gummier and more flexible than the newer bottles did. So there is some change to it. But that's what I'm saying. You can test it. It still broke wood, still broke the wood. And we tested on poplar though. So the glue could be usable. Again, take a couple of scrap pieces from the project you're actually doing. Everybody's got scrap pieces that they've cut off. Just glue some together, clamp them overnight, break them with a hammer. If you're getting wood failure, it doesn't need to be any stronger than that. Does it? So again, high glue will get up to about 3,700 PSI. So it's very strong, but it's not humidity resistant. So let's say I made a chair and my house's HVAC went out, that chair could fall apart under high humidity conditions. The glue re-liquefies under high humidity. As a matter of fact, I make a hygrometer. Basically, you just take a piece of paper, put high glue on there. When the glue dries, it shrinks. So that paper curls up into a nice tight cylinder. As the humidity goes up, it uncurls. So just by looking at it, you can tell, is it humid today or not humid today? Actually, the HVAC went out in our offices. So that'd be about 7 years ago. The glue started to run back off the paper and dripped all over the carpet. They were not happy with me. So the other thing is, then you want to get your cleanup items. If you're using polyurethane glues, get an acetone that cleans it up pretty well. Just get a bucket of water. So the other thing is, if you get glue on you, keep it wet. It's just microscopic balls, fluid, water. Keep them from coalescing into that film. You'll be able to just rub it out. It's going to take some mechanical strength. If the glue has dried before you catch it, and before you put it in the dryer, you can use acetone, water, vinegar mix, 1 to 1 to 1. It will soften any water-based adhesive, being construction adhesive, wood glue, sealant, anything that's water-based. That mixture will soften it. Now, type on 2 and 3 may be a little bit harder. It'll turn it kind of gel. You can scrape it and then repeat. Typically, you'll get it out. If your glue has gone through a dryer cycle, that means it has melted that plastic into a single sheet. There is no little balls kind of structure to pull apart again. So wear your glue proudly. Okay. And then during the glue up, you want to make sure you're above the chalk point. We talked about that. The assembly time. If you are a single-sided gluer, just get an egg timer. When that egg timer goes off, realize that you can't get all of that glued up. Just clamp what you have together now. Let that set, then come and glue them at a later date. Better than having them fall apart and then having to sand that glue off and do all of that other stuff. Okay. Either get a rag wet to wipe up the squeeze out or wait for it to get rubbery. I mean, either way, you choose which one that you like. And then drying. Again, we talked about drying, if sunken glue joints and all of that. If you can wait 3 days, it's going to take care of most of your problems. I mean, it really will. If you need to get into it, basically the next night, that speed set that you have that I gave out, I have seen people clamping 5 minutes, taking it out, starting to machine it. Can you do it? Yeah. Would my lawyers recommend it? No. But it's pretty interesting stuff. if you need to get stuff done in and out of clamps very quickly. But again, you're still going to work into that, swollen joints and all of that. So if you can wait for your final sand for a later period of time.
How long, if you're trying to glue something and can you hold it together with your hands and count to 5 minutes?
So the speed set actually 15 seconds. 15 seconds, hold it 15 seconds, just set it aside. It'll still be weak, but typically it's going to be fixtured enough to allow that piece to hold together enough. Yeah.
But your glue line might be safe.
Yeah, I mean, you're not squeezing all the glue out. Now, that's why we did the speed set. The speed set is that lower viscosity. So typically we'll give you the thinner glue lines than say the quick and thick, which can give you the bigger glue lines. Yes, absolutely. That's what they were designed for. Rub joints, which is basically put them together. You rub the glue until you feel it start to catch. Basically, all you're doing is you're rubbing it just like you would with glue between your fingers until it gets to its putty point. Once it gets to the putty point, it's not going to shrink very much anymore. You can set it aside and then it'll harden up. And as a matter of fact, because there's so little clamping pressure on them, those tend to be very, very strong joints. The problem with holding the pieces, and I don't know about you, but my hands start to shake. Anybody here have hands that don't shake? You?
Then you have to give yourself a break once in a while.
Well, the problem with it is shaking is you're actually breaking the glue line, right? So if you're shaking and it sets at that point, you've just broken the glue line apart. Now it can't flow back together again. So that's the problem with holding it for long periods of time. And that's why I say, if you're going to hold them against something, you're right, to stabilize it. Because the key is to let it putty up while it is not moving, right? Because if you break that glue line, it's not going to reform and you'll always have it'll be a weak joint.
Do you trust that glue joint on like turning a bowl on a lathe, that quick set, throwing it on a lathe?
I've seen a guy, yeah, with the speed set.
Yeah.
I saw a guy turn it after 5 minutes. I mean, I wouldn't, again,
Yeah, I wouldn't either.
but I've seen them do it and they're very confident. So I've used it all the time. So you can, but again, make sure your wood's dry. The drier the wood, the faster it's going to set. I mean, if you're at 12% moisture content or you're using green wood, I'd be like, no. Yeah.
What if you got a real bad joint and then you decide you got the sawdust, and why not mix a little glue in with the sawdust and then fill it in?
So actually Type on 3 has, it's actually walnut shell flour. That's what gives it that brown color and it's a little bit. So yeah, you can add some, but the problem is the more you put in, right, the more it's going to soak the moisture out of the glue and then the glue's not going to flow. So again, yes
This is afterwards.
and no.
When it's dry and you want to patch a hole.
No, this would be, I mean, if you want a thicker glue, again, we have our quick and thick, but you can
I
thicken.
think he was talking about if it's making a filler.
Oh, you can make a filler. Actually, if you guys want to know what the best wood filler is out on the marketplace, timber filler. Have you heard about it? It's called Timbermate wood filler. It's actually made with, it's an Australian product. We looked at having those guys put our label on it. It's that good. I mean, it's that good. But the problem is they're in most of the stores, so we'd be competing with them, and they were like, yeah, no, we're not going to do it. But it's made with hide glue and dirt.
How do you spell that?
DIRT.
Is that from your attorneys?
No, it's called Timbermate. Timber, timber as in wood, and then mate as in good day, mate. So it's an Australian product, so they get there. But it is wonderful. It takes stain beautifully. And so what I do is you get those furniture markers, the little furniture repair markers that come into different colors. You got to play with it a little bit, but put it on a piece of scrap wood and just kind of then get to the color that you're trying to get to. I've made repairs and I know where to find them. Because then you take a magic, the black markers, with the fine tip on that, draw in your grain pattern. I've done oak where I've just, did the little herky, just the tiny lines for the, I mean, it's amazing. You can get an exact match. You can't find it. Sands wonderfully. Sands wonderfully. Timbermade. If you haven't tried it, get it. I've used it all the time. If I've got a joint that's kind of gappy, it smells funny because it's high glue, and so the owner came and we talked about it, and I was like, well, what's this? What's that? What's that? Because I'm a chemist. He goes, well, my dad who invented it, he was an undertaker. And so the hide glue smelled horrible. And so there's that stuff that you put under the nose that's what he used as a smell for it. So it's got a funky smell, but again, works wonderfully. If you guys haven't tried it, give it a try. Works better than doing the glue mixing with the sawdust. I mean, yes, you can, but the problem is when you go to stain it, it stains like end grain.
Does it still have a humidity problem? High glue?
So normally what you're going to be doing is putting a finish over that. So it protects it anyway from any of the high humidity anyway. So in most cases, I've never had a problem with any humidity. And I've actually used it on stuff that's gotten wet. But of course, you have the finish over the top. So it really doesn't get wet.
Yeah.
So question.
What's the difference? Your high glue, old brown glue, and hot high glue.
So the old brown glue and our high glue are similar. We use a 251 gram strength hot high glue. He uses, I think, a harder one. Is it harder or softer? I can't remember because I talked to him about it and we did some testing. His is, I mean, it's so close. I don't know, it's whichever one that you decide you'd like to use. But the difference is all we do, we take the hot high glue, 251 gram strength hot high glue, just like you would buy at the store. We put it in a tank, put water in, mix it up, heat it up. But then we add a urea salt to that. The only thing that the urea salt does is it lowers the gel temperature. So instead of that gel temperature being above room temperature, right, because you put it on wood, it gels and gives you kind of that fast grab. Ours is 40 degrees. So it doesn't gel until it gets below 40 degrees. So it gives you more working time.
So do you have to heat up to like 140?
You don't have to heat it at all. So ours you don't have to heat. Hot high glue you do because it will gel at room temperature. Ours doesn't gel. So if your wood is at 40 degrees, then yes, it'll gel just like hot high glue will. So it's just a temperature. That's all it does. As a matter of fact, ours is a little bit stronger when you test it versus just the hot high glue versus ours. Ours tends to be a little bit stronger, but not enough to say, oh, it's stronger. Right now, our marketing guys would say that, but I won't say it.
But you can still reverse it.
Still reverse it. There's nothing different from it other than the gel point is different. It's just basically it's gravy. I mean, you take gravy and it cools off. What does it do? It gels. Everybody here, I'm going to tell you, everybody here has made their own high glue. And you're going to go, no, we haven't. I'm going to say, yes, you have. Raise your hand if you've eaten Kentucky Fried Chicken. Raise your hand if you've taken a paper napkin and tried to wipe the grease off your hand and it stuck to your fingers. Chicken high glue. All it is the collagen from the skin. That's all it is. Okay. So that's every animal is going to be able to do it. There's bunny hide glue, there's cow hide glue, there's horsehair glue. So there's a lot of different hide glues out there. The Gilders love bunny hide glue for whatever reason, but ours uses beef.
Sometimes people add salt to a joint to keep it from slipping when you clamp it.
Mm-hmm.
How does that affect the glue?
Doesn't affect it at all. Now, what I would say is if you're using it for a moisture resistant glue, use as little salt as possible because you're putting a water soluble salt in between all those particles.
Sometimes you hear about people adding vinegar to glue.
I wouldn't add vinegar because so the vinegar really doesn't do anything. What's going to happen is adding vinegar to the glue is going to put acid into your wood joint. That's going to over time damage the wood fibers. Any acid, I mean, that's why you don't use PVA glues for photographs and stuff, right? Because over time it'll cause the fibers of that wood to deteriorate, turn brown. So any acid that you put in, you do not want acid in your glue lines. So my statement to them is no.
Other than like a nostalgia or reversibility, why would people use high glue nowadays?
I agree with you. The reversibility is what gives it its nature of why most people will use it, right? That reversibility. That's why if you're making a violin, anybody here make a violin? I mean, it's like a, what, months-long process, and that's when you're very fast at it. So those pieces are designed to have certain curves, thicknesses to give it that resonance and all of that. So if you take it, if you have to repair it and you have to damage the wood pieces, the chances of you coming back and getting a piece exactly like what they just made in that violin is nil, right? And so the violin will come back with a different sound to it. So that's why they use hide glues for that, because they can repair it. They can take one piece off if they have to. Nothing gets damaged in that, and so they can re-glue it back together. So really, that's it. I know there's people who are like, I don't like that. I'm going back to the original stuff, and I'm like, well, then get rid of your table saw and get the rock. Right? I mean, you can go back to how our ancestors used to do it, but my statement is, well, did you go far enough? I mean, you grab some rocks and start banging away.
One advantage to the high glue is you don't have to scrape it out of the joint. It will stick to itself.
It will stick to itself. Now, the problem with repairing a high glue is over time, as the bacteria gets into it, and the mold and the fungus, because it is a food source. I mean, it's a food source. So if your humidity gets up high enough, then the mold and the mildew will grow. It will start to reduce the molecular weight. Just like that 20-year-old glue that we used, it did not dry right? And so it changes the structure of that. So if I'm gluing high glue onto deteriorating glue, right? How we look at things in the adhesive is we look at what's called the chain of adhesion, right? I have substrate A. I've got the interface between substrate A and the glue, which is the bonding area. Then I have the glue itself, and then the bonding area between substrate B and substrate B. My glue only has to be as strong as the weakest link in that chain, kind of like the statement that I made with the balsa wood. I don't have to be, all I have to be is as strong as the balsa wood, right? And a cheap glue can do that in most cases. Now, our glues obviously will work well and good quality and all of that. And I can tell you it will never be the glue, because our quality systems are such that nothing goes out that isn't good. And so I couldn't say that about all of the companies I work for. In those cases, then it was like, well, maybe we'll look at it. But here I don't have to. I mean, when I get a call, your glue sucks, I know it doesn't. I mean, it just doesn't. We've never had a problem with the glue. It's always been a process issue when they send us stuff to look at. So
Your glue definitely doesn't suck. I buy 2-3 gallons a year of the type of glue, by the way. When I'm doing a big batch of cutting boards, and do you anticipate a problem with the glue if I dump it into a small little container and use mini paint roller to really go after it? As long as I'm keeping it wet.
yeah, as long as you keep it wet. Now, if you need more working time, because I know some of these boards have a lot of different pieces to it, there's 2 ways of getting longer working time. One is just moisten the wood a little bit, right? Because if you're above 17% moisture content, the wood's not going to suck the moisture out of the glue. And then just get a humidifier, just one of those humidifiers, just blow over your glue up area, get your relative humidity high. You'll have an unlimited time to put it together. But just note that if you get the wood wet, it's going to take longer to dry. Just set them aside for a little bit longer.
That foam roller, once it gets loaded up, I could probably set it aside for a day, and it would still,
Yeah.
it would still flow.
Yeah. in a lot of cases, you could just put a small layer of over the top of the glue, just float water over the top, and that'll keep the glue from drying out on the top. All right, so that's all I have at this point in time. I'm going to stick around until all of the questions are answered. So I'm going to be here. Thank you guys for showing up and have a good night.